Alright, so let's make this push rod for our Sarrus mechanism. And if we take a look at the drawing that we might have available for this, it's essentially going to be a freehand sketch. We're going to be putting in some reference geometry, both vertical and horizontal center lines in here. But initially we're going to be creating these ends in here. These are going to be where the connecting apparatus is going to be. So it's going to be a series of bosses with a hole in it. They're going to be 5.5 inches apart. And it's got an inside diameter of 25.25, a quarter of an inch and a half inch for the outside diameter. Then we're going to extrude that out by 1/2 inch. And then we're going to do a bunch of freehand sketching in the middle. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So we're going to start with our, you got to consider the orientation of the Sarrus mechanism. We're going to be considering the front plane. And I'm not going to define a material here for you. I'm going to let you do that. It could be wood, it could be plastic, some sort of metal alloy, steel, copper, aluminum, titanium, whatever you like. So we're going to start with the front plane, and we're going to go ahead and begin to sketch. So it's going to make that normal too. Let's go ahead and put in some center lines. So we're going to put the center line here down the middle. I'm going to go ahead and grab the center of that center line. I'm going to select the midpoint. Select the origin. We're going to make that coincident. We're going to stretch that out just a little bit. We're also going to be putting in a vertical one. So, we could do the midpoint line if you want to do that. You want to make sure you convert that back into construction geometry. And then let's go ahead and put that in. So we're going to put in a couple circles on one side. And we're going to make those concentric circles if you want to do that. And remember, the inside diameter is going to be 1/4 inch. So 0.25. Outside is going to be 0.5. And remember the distance between the two. If we were to click on any of these circles and go to that center line in here and then drop that on that side, double dimension or radius or a diameter dimension, that's going to be radius, single dimension. We're going to make that out there. We're going to make that 5.5 and stretch our center line so it goes through that. And then we're going to go ahead. Now we can do the one of two ways. We can mirror this as a feature or mirror this as a sketch. I'm going to go and do that as a sketch because I think I might save a couple mouse clicks if it did that. We're going to go ahead and select all that center line, our vertical center line in here, and now we're going to go ahead and mirror that to the other side. So now we have that in place. We're minimizing our dimensions. We only have 3 dimensions that define this whole thing. You don't want to go over here and add the same dimensions you have over here. Just looks really hokey when you put that into a drawing. So let's go ahead and extrude this. Extrude boss base, mid-plane. You want to make sure you do mid-plane. So we have that plane that's going to be right down the middle, which is going to be the front plane. And we're going to give that a specific distance of 1/2 inch. And then go to the green check mark. Okay, so let's not forget to rename our features. We're going to call these our connection bosses or something similar to that would be good. So connection boss, and typically not a dash in there, but we'll just call it that, or we can call that our base feature if you want to do that. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go right back to the front plane. We're going to go ahead and sketch on that, and we're going to do the same thing before. We're going to start with some center lines in here. So we're going to go to sketch, we're going to go to center line, we're going to go ahead and do kind of like what we did before. And we're going to make sure that these stay in the middle too. So I'm going to select the midpoint in this, go to the origin, we're going to make that coincident, stretch it out a little bit. You can do the same thing going vertical. I hate to do the same thing twice, so I'm going to go ahead and do center line and exaggerate that a little bit. Right click in this, so we're going to go to midpoint and select that. We're going to make that coincident. So there's one thing we want to do in here too, and you'll notice that that is not black. It's still blue. So let's go ahead and kind of exaggerate that a little bit. Select that. Let's go ahead and make that vertical. You want to make sure it's black. Remember, the endpoints of a center line don't need to be fully defined for the sketch to be fully defined. So if we were to go ahead and rebuild that as sketch number 2, it doesn't have that minus sign, which means it is fully defined. So let's go back to edit sketch, put that in place, and let's go ahead and put in our minimum and our maximum diameters on what's going to be in the middle here. And that's going to be the center revolve. So let's go ahead and do this. We can put in a couple center lines off of this one. We're going to put one in it's going to be 0.6. One's going to be 1/4 inch. So the way we dimension this, we're going to go ahead and dimension that point to that line, because we can't really do the line to the line, because if we try to do that and try to go over that line, escape twice here, once we do an ordinate dimension, it's not going to let us go over. It's just going to let us stay on that side. But if we go between a point and that center line, now we can do the single dimension or the double dimension. So we're going to put that one in place, make that 1/4 inch, and this one's going to be 0.6 inches. So one's going to be our minimum, one's going to be our maximum. So we're going to go ahead and we can if we want to do. And again, we're kind of considering this for a drawing, but we can call this our maximum dimension. And you probably want to make that capital letters. It's a standard for drawings. You want to make sure that you're using capital letters. I know in the modern sense here, capital letters means you're kind of shouting at them, or shouting at somebody, or try to get somebody's attention. But here, you are really trying to get somebody's attention in a drawing. So that's what you do. That one of them is going to be a maximum diameter. What you do is you click on that dimension, and below that dimension text over here, below what's in the brackets, what's inside the brackets, it's going to give you the value that's in there. You can type in some text after that, or below it, or on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and borrow that, because I'm not a fast typer. If we're going to do the same thing down here for the 1/4 inch dimension, we're going to go ahead and put that in there. We're going to paste it. And this one's going to be minimum. Okay, so there's our 2 dimensions. We're going to keep that in place. We're going to go and stretch that apart. Stretch that over here a little bit. And now we're going to go ahead and put in our dimensions. We're going to put in not just our dimensions, we're going to put in a series of lines and arcs, and we're going to define this not by putting radius dimensions on the arcs. We're going to define everything to that horizontal center line. Okay, so let's start putting in some of our arcs and lines. So we're going to do this. We're going to start over here in this line, over here, that vertical center line. We're going to sketch everything out on this side and just on the top. And to maintain that symmetry, we're going to take everything we're going to sketch out there, we're going to mirror it over to the other side. And then we're going to revolve that around. I'll show you how to do that. Conceivably, we could probably use style splines or a spline to do this, but let's practice by using arcs and lines as a requirement for this part. We're going to use arcs and lines. I'm going to show you how to put that together without using radius dimensions. We're going to be using distance and angle dimensions instead. And we're going to be dimensioning everything to that horizontal center line, because that's measurable. We can measure from that. So let's start with an arc. We're going to start with a 3-point arc. We're going to start over here. We're going to sketch that down a little bit. We're not going to go all the way up here to that line up here, which is going to be our maximum. We're going to make that in the middle sometime. And then somewhere in the middle over here, too, we're going to meet the minimum. So we want to make sure that we sketch between these 2 lines. And one thing I want you to do here, too, is to do your own thing. Don't put in the dimensions and the series of arcs and lines that you're going to be putting in here. You don't do mine. Don't put in my dimensions. Do your own stuff. I'm just going to demonstrate this real quick, how you can do that. So if you want to start with an arc up here, the center point of that arc's here. If you want to make that tangent to the other side, which you probably should do, we're going to take the center point of that arc, and we're going to make those, and that vertical center line, we're going to make those coincident. So it'll be tangent to the other side, but when we mirror that over, we're going to have to redefine that a little bit. So we're going to have to think about how we're going to do that. I can show you a little trick on how to do that too. So once you get that in place, let's go ahead and put in a line. We'll just go between arcs and lines. Make sure that that's a tangent. And let's go and define that a little bit. So we're going to put in a distance relationship in here between maybe this point and that center line in here. We're going to go over halfway. Remember, you want this not to be a radius, but a diameter dimension. So this really is now, that's a radius. That's going to be a diameter. We're going to make that a diameter. And don't have run-on dimensions in here. You don't want to have a bunch of digits after the decimal. Let's make that a little bit clearer and just type in 0.55 on that. So now we can take this point and this line over here and define that too. Put that over halfway, maybe 0.5. Make that 1/2 inch. And it still isn't fully defined, so let's see what we need to do. So you can see that with that straight line in there, we could probably add an angle dimension on that and to get that fully defined. I'll define that arc. Or another alternative is to take a distance dimension between that point and that vertical line, which can't be measured very easily. So we're going to go ahead and put in that angle. We're going to go ahead and click on this. If you get something like that, it's asking for an ordinate dimension. But let's click on that twice, escape twice. Let's go and put that in there. Remember, you don't want a bunch of digits after the decimal. Let's make that an even, maybe 13 or 12 degrees. And what that does is it provides a blue endpoint at that line. And now we can stretch that out a little bit, and we're going to continue to work. So as you go, let's go ahead and define this as we go. And let's put in some more stuff in here. So let's go ahead and put in, let's try a tangent arc. So we'll go from that point over here. It's going to make a tangent to that line that we have in there. Let's go ahead and sketch that up. Make that a little bit long over here. And let's take the bottom of that arc and this, Now let's provide our minimum dimension in here. So we're going to make that tangent in here. And that puts that into place. So we can actually move that around a little bit. Squish that up. And now we have that in place. So again, smart dimension between this point and that line over here. Go over halfway. Maybe 0.3. And that puts that into place. And now the endpoint of that arc is still loose and undefined. So we can add more stuff. And instead of just putting in another line, let's put in another arc. Now let's go ahead and sketch that out a little bit. Let's take that arc and let's make our maximum condition in here. So we're going to take that arc and that line, we're going to make that tangent. And so on and so forth. So now we can put in, let's say, another line in here. Sketch that in here. We might be able to pick up that tangent relationship, which we did. And we can define this even more. So between this point and that line, we can see that maybe that's 0.5. It's close to 0.5. We can put that in there. Between this line and that point in here, we could do the same thing. It's we already had that selected, that center line. So let's make that 0.52. Again, these are your numbers. So you're going to put in your own numbers, your own series of arcs and lines, whatever you want to do. If you want to put in another line in here, have a sharp corner, you could do that too. So let's do that. Let's do that. And just for the fun of it, let's go ahead and maybe make these, is that a little bit too steep for perpendicular? It might be. But we could do something like that. Then we could put an arc in on top, maybe a tangent arc. Go ahead and put that into place. And if you want to, we can make that tangent also up here. So to define this a little bit better, let's go ahead and put a dimension between that point and that line. Don't want the distance dimension in there. But we want to go put a distance dimension between that point and that line. We're going to go over halfway and maybe make that 0.3. So that's a shorty. Now if we want to make, if we want to go ahead and put a dimension between maybe the top of that arc, maybe not at the maximum condition, and that line in here, we could put that in here too. And we're going to keep that undefined in here a little bit. We're going to come back to that. But let's take that dimension and let's put that in at a maximum condition. So go to leaders. We're going to make that maximum. And now we're going to put in something less than 0.6. So 0.58 would be good. Now that's not fully defined. So before we go, let's go ahead and make sure we do get this fully defined. So let's go ahead and put a dimension between that point and that center line in here. Maybe make it 0.4. So now we're almost done. Let's take the endpoint of that arc, still underdefined. Let's put in like one more tangent arc from that line over there to maybe the edge over here. Now to help define that a little bit better. And again, we can put in a dimension between that point, that center line in here. Put in your own value, maybe 0.52. Do some rounding. And now let's go ahead and complete this. If we take the endpoint of that arc and see what we need to do, we could probably define one more distance relationship. And let's make this 0.34. Now let's go ahead and take that endpoint and take a vertical line in here right in the middle of that boss that we put in there and put that down. Now let's go ahead and go all the way over here to this side. In fact, let's put in that last. Well, you definitely want to have something that goes down here like that, because what that's going to do is going to complete this, this cycle that we have in here. So with all these connected lines and arcs, we want to make sure it all terminates on that vertical center line, or that horizontal center line in here. Everything's going to terminate on that. So when we mirror this over to the other side, this part is going to be over here on that boss over here, and you want to make sure it all ends on that horizontal center line. So let's do that. Let's right-click on this, go to Edit or Select Chain, and with the Control key depressed, let's go to that vertical center line. Now we're going to mirror that over to the other side. And remember how we had that defined before? It's not defined now. And what isn't defined is over here. Where we used to have an arc that used to terminate right there on that vertical center line. It's not there anymore. We do have symmetry, so whatever we do on one side, it's gonna work on the other side too. But let's do this. We're going to take a point. We're going to put that point on that line. We're going to take this point and that arc with the Control key depressed. We're going to click on midpoint. And we're going to take this point and that vertical center line. We're going to make that coincident too, which it already is. So what did that do? Well, it provided us a point that we'd actually make a dimension on. So now we can actually put a dimension back in there. It defines an initial step. And if we go to that between that point and that horizontal center line, now we can define that. So maybe 0.54 would be a good thing to do. Now it's black. It's fully defined. We got the end caps down here with that vertical line. Right in the middle of those bosses that we have. You want to make sure you don't violate the hole in here, but you also want to make sure you're at least on that boss, you're connected to that boss. So once we do that, now we can revolve this. So if we go up here to the features, go to the feature tab, Revolved Boss space, and it's asking if you want it to be closed. So let's think about what we need to do here. We have this open feature in here, and if we were to do an extrude boss space on that, it would provide a thin feature, it would add some thickness to it. But with Revolve Boss space in here, it's going to suggest that between these two endpoints, the endpoint over here and the endpoint over here, and those two vertical, short little vertical lines in the middle of those bosses, it's going to take a line and automatically put it between those two, if we didn't do that ourselves. So we're going to say yes here, and watch what it does. It's going to put that in there. So axis of revolution is going to be this guy. Now you can see the yellow preview of what we're going to get. If we go to the green check mark, now we have that in place. So remember, this is your own design. I don't want you to emulate my design. You put in your series of arcs and lines with the dimensions of that horizontal center line in there and get a shape that you like. And if you don't like the shape that you have, if you don't like this corner in here, go back in there and get rid of some of those lines that we have in there. Maybe that perpendicular relationship, maybe some other elements in here. Redo that as you see fit, but make sure you do meet the minimum and the maximum values that we have in here, because I'm going to be checking that. And make sure you do your revolve too. Make sure you rename that feature. And we're going to call that our center revolver. Just something descriptive besides just revolve one. So that's a part of renaming your features. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the sketch that's in here. So if we look at our sketch 2, and remember we did not have that line in the bottom, and the SolidWorks added that automatically. This is the reason why we had to take a point, or take a line from that point down here, a vertical line from that point in there, all the way down through the middle of that boss to that center line. If we didn't have that, if we just had to terminate here, the SolidWorks would try to put a line between that point over here and this point over here, and that would have goofed up a lot of our geometry. We would have had some solid bodies kicking out here, or I suspect it probably would not have resolved itself. But we could have also taken a line as our very last step from that point over here to this point over here, but SolidWorks would do that for us automatically, so we just let them do that. So there is our push rod. Okay, one last little step. Let's put in a fillet in here. I was looking at this. If you look at this and you're yanking and cranking this a lot, guess where it's going to break? It's probably going to break over here at a minimum. It's not going to break it to maximum. It might break over here because we have a sharp corner. It might break over here where we have our boss. So let's put in some fillets just for the fun of it. And let's go ahead and, let's define it. Especially if yours comes to a sharp corner down here, fillet might be a real good thing. So 1/10 of an inch, we could try that. We can go ahead and click on that edge. It kind of shows you that preview. We do the same thing over here. Click on this edge over here. And maybe over here, if you don't like that sharp corner in here, see what that does? It's going to smooth that out a little bit. But definitely you want to put it here at the very ends where it connects down here. It just provides a nice smooth finish to it. And if you go to the green check mark, there. Now I promise, that's the end of our push rod. So there you have it, our push rod. Let's put that into our Sarrus Mechanism.